Hi guys, in today's video we're going to make some Western buildings. I'm making this primarily for Malifaux, but it should work with any 28mm game that you want Western buildings. To start with, just make a box. I made a box out of foam core. You can actually just use a cardboard box if you have one. And then I just drew out some rough shapes anytime you want a door or a window or anything that you want to be decoration. In this case, I think this one, it just had a door in the front. Obviously, this is a good project where you could make several of them at once. I wouldn't make just one at a time. Once you get your box and your outline done, I'm just using some craft sticks, and then I'm just going along the line of the box, along the outside of it. So, in this case, the buildings I made, I just wanted them square. I didn't want any funky shapes. And it just happened to be that a popsicle stick with the rounded edges clipped off fit almost perfectly. But of course, you don't want just a bunch of solid sticks because it wouldn't look right. So I just kind of randomly went through and clipped off somewhere along that couple inches or whatever on one side, just to make it some depth variety. And then, of course, on some of them, I left the full stick, just to make it look like it was they happened to have a plank that fit. So, just the variety, I think, helps out a lot when you do anything like this. Another option I did, which a little bit later on in some of the other buildings, not so much in this first one, but I just clipped off a whole bunch instead of doing it one stick at a time. That way, I had a big pile, and I can choose some different shapes or colors, because obviously every popsicle stick isn't exactly the same. So this way it just worked out a little bit better because you have some variety with your sticks. Anything that's broken or something like that, don't throw it away just because it's broken. Put it on there because it adds character to the building, even if it's just slight. One of the other things I would highly recommend doing that I didn't do on any of these, and you'll see it in the finished pictures, is paint the box first, either a brown or a black or something like that that'll kind of hide. I left mine white, apparently because I'm stupid, but it really just anywhere, because the sticks don't fit perfectly together, and it was really hard to get any kind of paint in between the sticks to the building behind. So that was definitely something I'd recommend doing better than what I did. Around the door frame here, I just had some balsa wood that was a little bit thinner. Anything you have that would look different than the other sticks would be perfect. So it just frames out that. Even if you had to, you could just maybe trim a stick in half or something to make it a little bit smaller. The balsa wood I had worked pretty good because it actually was thicker than the popsicle sticks. So it added some variety and some depth to it, so it actually made the door frame stand out. And the same thing with the window frames that I did. Other than that, just continue on until you finish off the whole building. Yeah, and like here, there's that gap just to make it fit. Sometimes you did have to trim down a stick vertically just a little bit. I have this little miter scissor gauge thing that helps break up things pretty easy, and it also did a pretty good job of breaking something vertically, so I could fit it in. Yeah, kind of work with what you got. Okay, so here's the initial building done. Have the planks all the way through. Don't really have anything on the top yet or anything else. I did decide to use that other door as a back door, and then I made a front door and then a front window just to give it some variety. So the next thing we're going to make is the front deck, and so I just made real quick just a simple little frame and then stuck it on there. Pretty simple. And then I just went through, I had these little matchsticks that I bought from the craft store and just glued them in. Cut out just a ton of them. I knew what the measurement was, and just cut out a whole bunch and just start gluing them in. I again don't recommend this method because it was a lot of little sticks. Burnt my fingers a whole bunch. I just wouldn't recommend it. I think this is the only building I used the matchsticks on. Everything after this, I just used a different thickness craft stick just so that it didn't match the planks that was on everything else a little bit. And then just use that because the matchsticks look neat, but I just don't think it was worth the effort. But when you're doing this for yourself, if you do this for yourself, decide for yourself. I mean, maybe you think the matchsticks is worth the effort just because it makes some really small little planks that, you know, kind of look pretty good. But I think for 28 mil, I think it was almost too small. But you'll see, it turns out okay. Here I'm just attaching it to the building and didn't quite fit flush, which is good. So I just used some popsicle sticks cut up to make a spacer, and yeah, it attaches just fine. It is a little wobbly. You could use something else maybe to hold it a little bit good, but I mean it's flush with the ground, so there's really no reason why the wobbliness should be a big deal, unless it depends on how you're storing it. So across the top, I wanted to frame out the top with sticks as well, just to kind of break it up so it didn't look so. And well, you didn't see the bow. I mean that's the main goal here anyway. So I just measured it out, you know, on the fly, cut it up, stuck it on there. Not too big of a deal. After that, made some steps for the back, since this one went all the way to the bottom. I think this is the only one I did that because obviously it didn't look quite right. So I just cut up some sticks, made the bottom one wider than the door frame, and then narrowed down the next one, and then narrowed down the next step. Just made about the simplest steps you could possibly make, just to fit in there. Looks pretty good. Okay, so this is the next thing to do, and this was pretty good. But I just had this, you can barely see this acrylic tube and some tacky glue on some cardstock, and I just rolled that strip of paper, cardstock, around the tube. This is just to give it a little pipe, and this will be used to simulate just like a stove pipe that's coming out the top. It worked pretty good. Just let it completely dry before you try to take it off. I didn't need to band mine, but I could see if the paper starts to unravel, you might want to do that. Once it's completely dry, then you could glue it to the top. So, also on the top, I didn't want that to be so just, I mean, there's nothing there. So I just took some tacky glue, and then I have this crafty sand, and this is just sand, pure sand, it's not gravel. And just rubbed it all along there. It almost makes it just like you have sandpaper across the top, which is kind of funny. But that just gives it just a little bit of texture, so it just isn't just flat stuff. You can't really see it, I don't think, in the final product, but you can definitely feel it when you put miniatures on there. Now, as you can see, the tube is completely dry, and I'm just checking it to make sure that the paper isn't going to fray out, and to see if I need to trim off anything along the top, because I don't roll things perfectly. So if you do, good for you. I'm just not one of them. Again, just using some tacky glue around, if I can get it out of the tube. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. And then just glue it straight down, let it dry. I picked the back, but obviously those stove pipes could have been in the middle of the building, it could have been at the front of the building. That's really completely up to you. And here I'm using these matchsticks again, these really small sticks, and I want to make just the window frame, or the window panes, basically. So I just measured by hand, cut, glue, you know, and then once I get I did the vertical first, glued it in. Once it was in, then I could measure by hand for the side panes to give it that little cross pane, just to make it not look like it's just a wide open thing. I didn't measure, obviously, if it was dead center or anything like that. Again, I think if it's a little rougher, to me, it makes more sense for a Western building. They didn't have perfect, measurements for everything, so if something looks a little rough, I don't think it's too bad. For the door, I just cut out the same sticks in the for the panels, just to make a door, and I just kind of set them all in there where they all fit. And then I used a measure to make sure they were straight, and then used a the miter part just to miter off and make a little cross member, almost like a barn door, to hold the sticks straight and in place, and just use tacky glue to glue it all in. Okay, so I also painted the Dwarf opening and then the back of the door black, just because I knew I wouldn't be able to get a brush in there otherwise. And then I also wanted a door knob, so I have these little circle brass hooks that I thought, once they're super glued on, make perfect little latches. So, well, that's it for building it. Stay tuned for part number 2, where we will go through and paint this entire critter. Thanks for watching.